Welcome friends, welcome back to the kitchen, welcome back to Sunday Morning and the Old Cookbook Show. Today we're going to do a recipe out of this cookbook. This particular book was printed in 1855 and it is Miss Bliss Practical Cookbook. And then the title goes on from there in great detail about what the book covers in a bunch of crazy different fonts. It is the title page is a bit of a nightmare, I would say, from a design standpoint. And so the recipe we're going to do today is called curd pudding. I've never had a curd pudding before. I've never made a curd pudding before, not like this anyway. And it strikes me as sort of the intersection between baked custard and a cheesecake. So we're going to start out with some milk in this pot and we're going to bring it to a boil. And I'm using 3.25% milk fat milk. The recipe doesn't say what kind of milk to use. And in 1855, I mean, you could have been just going out to the barn and milking the cow and bringing it in and using fresh, warm milk. You could have been using milk that perhaps had been separated and the cream had been skimmed off the top. So it would have had a lower milk fat. I don't really know. And I don't know that it's really going to matter all that much. So we're going to bring this up to a boil. And while it's coming up to a boil, we'll deal with the wine next. Now, I've cut this recipe in half. I didn't think Julie and I needed that much pudding. So it just says wine. It doesn't say what kind of wine, whether it's red wine, white wine, could be any kind of wine. Especially in 1855 in Philadelphia where this was printed, it could have been almost anything. Julie and I had the discussion, would we prefer a white wine or a red wine and end up with possibly a horrible color in the end. So we decided on a white wine, and we're just using something local. Okay, the milk is boiling, and you want to make sure you're stirring it so that it doesn't boil over, which it's very close to doing now, and also so it doesn't scorch to the bottom of the pot, which is no good either. So I'm going to turn the heat off and stir in the wine. Now I'm just going to leave this here so that the curd will set. While the curd is coming together, I will get the eggs ready. So I've got 3 eggs and I'm supposed to beat them lightly. So I'm just going to do that in this bowl. Just give them a bit of a light whisk. And next I'm going to move on to this bowl where I'm supposed to mix together butter and sugar. So in goes the sugar first. And the recipe specifically calls for fine sugar. And sugar is one of those things that people get really weirded out about. And I go through the comments and I'm amazed. Everyone has this idea that sugar, prior to, World War II, was always brown, always like that sugar in the raw, really rough. That's not the case. Not the case at all. White refined sugar first appears in India 2,500 years ago. The process was discovered and they started refining sugar that way. That process ends up in Europe sometime in the 12th to 13th century. And white refined sugar became, from cane, the thing. That was what people used. And sure, it used to come in a cone or in a block, and you would chip away some and then grind it out to make it fine. But white refined cane sugar, just like I used here, has been around forever, for a very long time. So I'm going to beat this together until it's nice and light. Nice and light, looks great. So I'm going to switch to a whisk. And I'll just scrape off all the sugar and butter. And now I'll whisk the eggs in. Next in is the flavoring, which is nutmeg. This cookbook, 1855, still too early really for a lot of vanilla to be used. Vanilla would have been available, but it would have been rare and expensive. We were just, as humans, starting to figure out how to grow vanilla. And I've said that before in other episodes. It's one of those things that happened really late. And then when it did happen, it became ubiquitous. And a lot of these other flavorings that you see from an earlier time period sort of fall by the wayside. So where nutmeg was easy to get, even rose water or orange blossom water was used a lot as the flavoring. All of those things were supplanted. So I think, supplanted by vanilla. So I think this would work with vanilla as well. If you're someone who doesn't like nutmeg, just put some vanilla in. It would be fine. Now we need to turn our attention back to the curds and whey. So the curd has set up nicely, and the recipe book just says to turn off the whey. So I think I'm going to use this super fine mesh strainer and just scoop out as much as I can. Let the whey drain off. It won't take long. And then plop it in for mixing and just come back in. Might take me 2 or 3 scoops to get it all out. So the last little bit. Now, probably be far more efficient if I had, put a piece of cheesecloth in a big fine mesh strainer and poured it through and captured it all. I've got like 99% of it this way. And I'm going to use this whey probably to make ricotta. I'll recook that in a little while and see if I can get any ricotta out of it. Now, mix this together. It says to beat it well. Now it says to bake in small patty pans. No other instructions about time, temperature, etc. And no real information about what size or shape of patty pan it wants me to use. Patty pans came in a whole range of shapes, some really fancy shapes, a whole range of sizes. Some were big and shallow, and some were like this, sort of fluted. They came in heart shapes. They came in a whole range of different shapes. So I think you could do it in this. You could do it in a muffin tin. I think that's probably what most people would have in their kitchen today that would work. So I'm going to portion this out. I've got the oven preheated to 350, and we'll see how that works out. And I'll keep my eyes on them to see how well they bake. I think I'm looking for a cheesecake type consistency. I'm also worried about overfilling them because I don't know how much they're going to puff up. And I feel like I've got more filling than pans. Yeah, more filling than pans, but not too much. Now, the recipe says to serve with a wine sauce. So I looked in the book, and towards the back, there were 2 recipes for wine sauces. So I'm going to make this one. It's called a cold wine sauce. And this second recipe shows how cookbooks in this time period, 1850s, probably the 1890s and earlier, were completely scattered. This second recipe for the cold wine sauce uses teacups and glasses. The earlier recipe used quarts, pints, pounds, ounces, that sort of thing. The second one is teacups. And I know that everyone, or a certain number of people, are going to write down in the comments that a teacup is a standard measurement. Not too long ago, I went down into our equipment room and measured a wide range of teacups that we have, and none of them, absolutely none of them, were any sort of standard measure. The sizes were all over the map. There was absolutely no consistency, not even consistency between the same manufacturer and the teacups that they made at the same plant. So teacups were definitely not a standardized measure. You had a teacup in your house and you always used it, and the recipes worked out because it was a ratio of your exact teacup. But from house to house, you would get a different size recipe. And then it changed a little bit when you added in a different type of measurement, like a glass. How big is a glass? There's no measure. I'm going to say that's beat to a cream. And since I don't really know what a glass of wine is, I'm just going to dribble some in. So I'm just going to mix this in and keep dribbling in a little bit more wine until I reach a consistency that I think the sauce should be. And I know that there's going to be people who let me know down in the comments the size of a glass. And they're going to try and take 2021 thinking and put it against 1850, 1750, 1650 thinking. Believe me, it just doesn't work. When I look through all of these old cookbooks, and I have, thousands of old cookbooks, there's no consistency in the measurements from this time period. And even in the books where they try to let you know at the beginning sort of the sizes of different things, from book to book to book, there is no consistency in the wording, the naming, or the sizing of a lot of these things. That standardization didn't happen until after the 1890s, and it really was the Boston Cooking School book that started to solidify that.
Hey, Glenn.
Hey, Jules.
Hey, friends. What is the
chunky
chunky mixture?
Yeah, no amount of beating, whisking, or whipping with a hand mixer has brought this sauce together at all.
Oh, it's supposed to be a sauce.
There's no way that this is
Okay.
going to come together. There's no way that the wine is going to mix with the butter.
Oh, it's a wine sauce.
Yes. So of the two sauces in this cookbook that are wine sauces,
Yeah, that's not even that's completely separated.
yeah,
Huh.
it's never going to come together. There's a hot wine sauce that I could have made that might have been better, but this one will never work. Never.
Wow. That
So
it's got an interesting flavor though, so I look forward to it when you perfect it. But it's going with this.
So this is a curd pudding,
Okay.
and I don't know that it'll come out of the petit
Wow,
pan.
that's even like a
Yeah.
no stick.
Yeah, it's not going to come out of the petit pan. I've got some expectations for this. Let's see what the texture's like.
With a little gentle nudging, it comes out grumbly. Mm-hmm. It looks actually the texture looks a lot like
Like that. Yes.
It tastes very similar too.
Yeah. No, it's completely the same flavor as that, and that's the wine that's pulling that together. That's the wine.
Apparently it's wine flavored. Okay. So that
The texture's grainy,
yeah.
really grainy. So the curd texture carried through. Like I thought the curd might melt and become smooth like a cheesecake, but it didn't. It stayed very grainy. The flavor's nice.
I like the flavor. I actually think it would be very good in if you put down like a crumb
Yeah.
crust and put this on
And
top
put
with
on
some
top.
fresh fruit.
Yeah.
Like fresh strawberries or anything that goes like I'm assuming it was a white wine since from its color and its flavor. Anything that kind of goes with white wine, that light summery fruit, I think would go really well. You could probably even get away with something savory as well if you wanted to.
Definitely something savory.
Yeah.
The other thing with this is the curdling, the curd creation, the curdling of the milk relies on the acid in the wine. And if your wine is low acid, like so many wines today are, because people have moved away from high acid, low sugar, they're now high sugar, low acid. There may not be enough acid in the wine to curdle the milk. So you might have to add, if you decide to make this, you might have to add a little bit of either lemon juice, which would add a great flavor, or some vinegar in order to get it to curdle.
Yeah, it's an interesting recipe. I think it needs a little something to make it a really fabulous usable recipe.
Yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
gotta start somewhere.
The texture's off. I'd give it a try, though. I would give it a try. A crumb, a bigger pie, and a nice sauce. It would go together really well.
Ooh, some fresh fruit with a caramel sauce.
Yeah,
You could really take
yeah.
this. So, like anything, right? It's an idea, and at this point, it's a really little idea that
Yeah.
needs a lot to make it useful.
So, if you make a curd pie, if you live somewhere where curd pie is still made, let us know.
Yeah, because
And let us know what your recipe is, because maybe this is not the greatest recipe. I mean, some of the other recipes in this book aren't great either. Thanks for stopping by. See you again soon.